Imagine lying in a sterile hospital bed, knowing these are your final hours. The weight of a 20-year secret is heavier than the oxygen mask on your face. You've signed the NDAs. You've seen what happens to those who talk. But as the heart monitor slows, the truth becomes more important than the consequences. He speaks of a cave in the mountains of Kandahar. He speaks of a creature that shouldn't exist. A 12-foot-tall humanoid with red hair, double rows of teeth, and 6 fingers on each hand. He wasn't just a witness to a skirmish. He claims he spent 47 days guarding this chained giant in the dark. What if our history books are just a sanitized version of a much more terrifying reality? To understand this confession, we have to go back to 2002, to a cave in Afghanistan that the Pentagon says doesn't exist. The year is 2002. The world is focused on the rugged terrain of Afghanistan as Operation Enduring Freedom shifts into high gear. The US military is navigating the most complex cave networks on Earth, hunting for insurgents. But according to some, they found something far older. This is the legend of the Kandahar Giant. The story first broke through a whistleblower known only as Mr. K, or sometimes Wandandian. He didn't go to the mainstream press. Instead, his testimony surfaced through investigators like Steve Quayle and L.A. Marzulli, men who specialize in the unexplained. The narrative is harrowing. A special forces team goes missing in a remote mountainous region. A second elite unit is dispatched to find them. They discover a cave littered with discarded military gear, and then the nightmare emerges. A humanoid of impossible proportions, weighing over 1,100 pounds. In the chaos, the giant allegedly impales a soldier named Dan with a massive, primitive spear before the team manages to bring it down with a barrage of high-caliber fire. It sounds like a movie script, a piece of modern folklore born from the stresses of war. But the official story provided by the media doesn't just dismiss the giant, it ignores the anomalies entirely. When you look for the Kandahar Giant in the official archives of the Department of Defense, you hit a brick wall. The military stance is total denial. They've stated clearly, we have no record or information about a special forces member killed by a giant in Kandahar. On the surface, that should be the end of it. But for those who study the black budget world, a government denial is often the first sign that you're over the target. The first major red flag appears when we look at the timeline of the Deathbed confession. Most versions of the Kandahar story claim the giant was killed instantly and airlifted out in a net. But the veteran's testimony introduces a disturbing detail. He claims he was part of a rotation that guarded a living, chained giant for 47 days. If the creature was neutralized in the cave, who were they guarding for 7 weeks? And why the discrepancy? Researchers have spent years digging through the casualty lists of 2002, looking for a soldier named Dan who fits the description of the man impaled in the cave. While there were casualties in the Kandahar region that year, none of the official reports mentioned spear trauma or massive blunt force from an unknown biological source. To the skeptics, this proves the story is a hoax, but to the whistleblowers, it proves something much more calculated, a systematic scrub of military personnel files. Then, there is the matter of physics. If we assume this giant existed, we have to deal with the square cube law. Dollar text to strength, propto text and area, text G versus weight, propto text and volumes, 3T dollars. As a human doubles in size, their weight increases 8-fold, but their bone strength only quadruples. A 15-foot giant would weigh nearly 1,500 pounds. Their bones would likely snap under their own weight unless their biology was fundamentally different from ours. The logistics of moving such a massive biological specimen are equally staggering. Imagine trying to load an 1,100-pound, 15-foot corpse onto a C-130 transport plane in a war zone without a single photo leaking. In 2002, digital cameras were rare, but soldiers still had film. Yet, not a single authentic image has ever made it to the public square. We are told that a massive security net was thrown over the entire operation, with the body being flown directly to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the same place rumored to house the Roswell wreckage. If this giant was just a myth, why use the same hiding place associated with the most classified secrets in American history? The government says it's a myth. The records say it's a ghost. But if this encounter never happened, why do we find the same giant-sized fingerprints all over our ancient past? And why does the trail lead us directly to a civilization that has been erased from every modern map? To understand the reality of these claims, we have to separate the internet myths from the physical artifacts that exist in the real world. The first thing you'll see if you search for the Kandahar Giant is a photograph of a massive shrouded figure lying on a military pallet surrounded by soldiers. It looks incredibly convincing. It's grainy, it's dramatic, and it seems to confirm every detail of the Mr. K testimony. But when we look at the source of that image, the trail leads back to a 2010's digital art competition on a site called Worth 1000. It was a Photoshop contest. And yet, this image has been used in dozens of documentaries as leaked evidence. Does this mean the giant is a total fabrication? Not necessarily. It means that the truth is often buried under layers of intentional misinformation. In the world of intelligence, this is known as poisoning the well. If you want to hide a real secret, you attach it to a fake photo so that when the photo is debunked, the truth is discarded along with it. But let's look at evidence that hasn't been debunked. Let's look at the Nevada Historical Society. In their archives, they hold a pair of sandals found in Lovelock Cave. These aren't just large, they are 15 inches long. For comparison, a modern-sized 12 shoe is about 11 inches. These sandals belong to someone of immense stature. The Paiute Indians have legends of the Sitekar, a race of red-haired giants who lived in those caves and were eventually wiped out in a great fire. Red hair, massive height. Cave dwellers. Does that sound familiar? If we have physical evidence of giants in the American West, why is it so hard to believe they could be hiding in the most remote mountains of Afghanistan? The mountain ranges of the Hindu Kush are some of the most inaccessible places on the planet. They are honeycombed with caves that have never been mapped by modern science. Then we have the leaked documents. Occasionally, an after-action report will surface on anonymous forums, allegedly detailing the Kandahar encounter. If you analyze these papers closely, you'll notice something strange. They lack the standard header and footer classification markings you see on real declassified documents. There are no serial numbers, no Naforn stamps, and the military jargon is often slightly off. This suggests these specific papers are modern fabrications. But why go to the trouble of faking a military report? Some researchers believe these fakes are created by the government itself to act as a lightning rod for conspiracy theorists, keeping them away from the actual classified files. But the most compelling evidence isn't found in a paper trail or a blurry photo. It's found in the very laws of nature. Earlier, we mentioned the square cube law. Science says a 15-foot man couldn't walk. But what if their biology wasn't like ours? What if their bone density was closer to that of an elephant or a dinosaur? $texture bone strength ipropto texture cross sectional area dollars. To support a weight of 1,500 pounds, the giant would need a skeletal structure that is fundamentally different from a standard human. Witnesses mention double rows of teeth and 6 fingers. These are biological anomalies often associated with extreme genetic divergence or ancient hybridization. The Bible speaks of the Nephilim. The Greeks spoke of titans. The Afghans speak of the Malak al-Maut. Every culture on Earth has a memory of these beings. They weren't just tall people. They were a different branch of existence entirely. While the military evidence is thin and the photos are often faked, the architectural evidence is written in stone across the globe. We see massive megaliths that no modern crane can lift. We see doors in ancient cathedrals that are twice the height of a man. We are told these were ceremonial. But what if they were functional? This is where the story of the Kandahar Giant stops being a military legend and starts being a piece of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that involves a lost global power, the Empire of Tartaria. If we are to believe the deathbed confession of a soldier in 2002, we have to ask a difficult question. Where did these beings come from? And how did they survive into the 21st century? The answer might lie in a name that has been scrubbed from every modern textbook, Tartaria. If you look at maps from the 18th and early 19th centuries, maps created by the finest cartographers of the era, you will see a massive territory labeled Grand Tartary. It spanned from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, covering the very regions where the Kandahar Giant was allegedly found. We are told Tartaria was merely a geographic term, a catch-all for the nomadic tribes of Central Asia. But the architecture tells a different story. Across the former lands of this empire, we find star forts, massive, geometrically perfect fortifications that defy the primitive engineering of the time. These structures are identical whether you find them in Russia, Europe, or the Americas. It suggests a global civilization with a unified technology. And then, there is the scale. Visit any major capital city built before 1900. Look at the post offices, the courthouses, and the grand cathedrals. You'll see ceilings 40 feet high and doorways that look like they were designed for a race of kings. Historians claim this was aesthetic choice to inspire awe. But Tartarian researchers believe it was utility. They believe these buildings were the home of the giants, the biological master builders of the old world. The Tartaria theory suggests that between 1850 and 1920, a global cataclysm occurred. Some call it the Mud Flood. It was a systematic reset of the human timeline, a massive event that buried the first floors of these grand buildings in sediment and wiped the giants from the surface of the earth. But what if they didn't all die? What if the survivors retreated? The mountains of Afghanistan and the Caucasus are the literal edge of the old Tartarian maps. These regions are some of the most geologically stable and cavernous on the planet. Some researchers believe the Kandahar Giant wasn't just a monster, he was a citizen, a living relic of the Tartarian era, surviving in the deep places of the world while the reset happened above him. When the US military entered those caves in 2002, they weren't just fighting a war on terror. They were stumbling into the basement of history. This explains the 47 days of guarding mentioned in the deathbed confession. If the military found a living Tartarian, they wouldn't just kill it and move on. They would keep it alive to extract information. Think about the value of that intelligence. This being would have knowledge of ancient technology, of free energy systems, and of a history that precedes our current reset. Is it a coincidence that the war in Afghanistan focused so heavily on these remote mountain ranges, far from the actual centers of government? Some believe the entire conflict served as a cover for a biological recovery operation. While the public watched the news, elite units were potentially scouring the Hindu Kush for the last remnants of Tartarian biology. Evidence suggests that the giants were the architects of the star forts. These forts were not just defensive, they are theorized to be massive power plants. They were designed to harvest atmospheric electricity, energy that was free and abundant before the modern era of metered power and fossil fuels. When the giants were removed, the knowledge of this energy was removed with them. The new powers that be had to erase the giants from history because their very existence proves that a superior, more advanced civilization lived here just 2 centuries ago. The Kandahar Giant was a threat, not because of his spear, but because of his dinar. If the public realized that giants were real, they would start asking who built the massive stone structures in their own cities. They would start asking why their local post office has 20-foot doors and windows that start 10 feet off the ground. The cover-up in the desert wasn't just about a monster in a cave. It was about protecting the reset narrative. Every time a skeleton is found in a mound in America or a giant is captured in a cave in Asia, the machine turns on to hide it, because if the giants are real, then Tartaria is real. And if Tartaria is real, then everything we know about our own technological progress is a lie. We are not at the peak of human achievement. We are living in the ruins of a much greater world, and we are being guarded by the very people who tore it down. If Tartaria was the empire of the giants, then the soldier's confession isn't just a ghost story. It is a report from the front lines of a war that has been raging since the 19th century. A war for the truth of our origins. But where did all the physical evidence go? Why don't we see these skeletons in our museums? The answer lies with a specific institution that seems to have a monopoly on the disappearance of history. If these giants were as common as the Tartaria theory suggests, the world should be overflowing with their remains. So, where are the bones? For over a century, a singular name has appeared at the center of this mystery, the Smithsonian Institution. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, local newspapers across the United States were filled with reports of massive skeletons being unearthed from burial mounds. In 1885, the New York Times reported on a skeleton found in Pennsylvania that measured over 9 feet tall. In 1897, a report from Wisconsin detailed a find of multiple skeletons with double rows of teeth and elongated skulls. According to the giant disposal theory, the Smithsonian would arrive at these sites, seize the remains for study, and then they would never be seen again. Critics claim these bones were systematically destroyed or dumped into the Atlantic Ocean to protect the fledgling theory of Darwinian evolution. If a race of giants existed outside the standard evolutionary tree, it would collapse the entire academic framework of the 20th century. The suppression didn't stop in the 1900s. It just moved into the shadows of the military-industrial complex. Consider the forbidden zones of the modern world. Why are there vast sections of the Grand Canyon that are strictly off-limits to hikers and researchers? Why are certain cave systems in Afghanistan and the Caucasus designated as high-security zones long after the insurgents have been cleared out? Whistleblowers from the defense community speak of Special Access Programs, or SAPs. These are projects so classified that they bypass congressional oversight. Some researchers believe these SAPs are the modern version of the Smithsonian's disposal crews. When a biological anomaly is found in a war zone or a construction site, a containment team is dispatched. They aren't there to study it for science, they are there to secure it for the state. The Men in Black trope isn't just for UFOs, it's for anything that threatens the reset timeline. We see this same pattern in the 2002 Kandahar incident. The soldiers involved were allegedly forced to sign NDAs that threatened them with life imprisonment. If it was just a strange animal or a tall insurgent, why the level of secrecy normally reserved for nuclear weapons? The suppression is active, it is ongoing, and it is professional. But there are cracks in the armor. With the rise of the internet, The leaked thermal footage and grainy cell phone videos from military zones have become impossible to fully scrub. While many are debunked as misidentified equipment, a handful remain unexplained, showing massive bipedal heat signatures moving through areas where no humans are permitted. Evidence suggests that the government isn't just hiding the past, they are guarding a living secret. This isn't about old bones in a basement, it's about a branch of humanity that still exists, hidden away in the basements of the earth. This is why the soldier on his deathbed was so terrified. He wasn't just guarding a prisoner, he was guarding the truth of our erasure. If the giants are still here, then the reset wasn't a total success. And that makes them the most dangerous things on the planet. Why does a 20-year-old story about a giant in a cave matter to you today? It matters because history is the foundation of our identity. If the foundation is a fabrication, then our entire modern society is built on sand. The suppression of the Kandahar Giant and the erasure of Tartaria aren't just academic disputes. They are about control. Mainstream academia benefits from a linear, predictable timeline. It keeps the public believing that we are at the absolute pinnacle of human evolution and intelligence. But if we were to admit that a race of giants once built a global empire with free energy and superior architecture, we would have to admit that we have regressed. Today, we see defense contractors and biotech firms showing an intense interest in extreme human genetics. Some researchers speculate that the giant captured in 2002 was never intended for a museum. Instead, his DNA was likely harvested for special access programs. Imagine the value of giant biology in the age of CRISPR and genetic enhancement. We are talking about increased bone density, extreme height, and cognitive abilities that have been lost to the average human since the last reset. Who benefits from keeping this master DNA in the hands of the few, while the rest of us are told that giants are just fairy tales? We are currently living through what many call the information reset. Algorithms and digital censorship are the modern version of the Smithsonian's incinerators. The narrative is being tightened. If you can control a person's understanding of their ancestors, you can control their expectations for their future. If we don't know that we once lived in a world of abundance and Tartarian grandeur, we will settle for the measured and monetized existence we are given today. The deathbed confession of that soldier serves as a glitch in the matrix. It is a reminder that the world is much older, much stranger, and much more connected than we are led to believe. Is the soldier a hero for breaking his silence, or is he a warning? Perhaps the Guardians aren't just watching the caves in Afghanistan. Perhaps they are watching the very edges of our collective curiosity, waiting to shut down the next person who looks too closely at the past. The story of the Kandahar Giant is a labyrinth. It starts with a whisper in a military hospital and ends with the ruins of a lost global empire. Whether you believe the Mr. K testimony as literal truth or see it as a modern myth, the questions it raises are undeniable. Why do the world's most powerful institutions work so hard to scrub giants from the record? Why are our cities built on the foundations of a grandeur we can no longer replicate? The pieces of the puzzle are right in front of us. They are in the 15-inch sandals in Nevada, the 20-foot doors of our cathedrals, and the high-security caves of the Middle East. The giants weren't just monsters in a cave. They were the architects of a world that was taken from us. The next time you walk past an old stone building that feels too big for its purpose, ask yourself, who was this really built for? What do you think happened in that cave in 2002? Was it a hoax or a glimpse into the Tartarian past? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you're ready to dig deeper into the secrets they don't want you to see, hit that subscribe button. The truth is out there, hidden in the shadows of history.